Ready to rumble. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Gil Clancy's Boxing Journal. With your host, legendary trainer and boxing expert, Gil Clancy. Featuring the biggest and brightest stars, plus the up-and-comers of the fight game. Gil Clancy's Boxing Journal.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another edition of Gil Clancy's Boxing Journal. My guest tonight is the most famous contemporary sports artist of our time, the suave, sophisticated, debonair, handsome, and rich Leroy Nieman. How's that, Leroy? Does that describe you pretty good?
I hope I can measure up to that. The visual part's the only thing that concerns me.
Well,
How
hey,
do
Leroy,
I look?
you look great to me, Leroy. I know you, I guess, since 1961, and you look better today than you did then.
I'm in better shape now, just like you are.
Well,
You're in better shape today than you were then.
You know, ladies and gentlemen, if you think about it, with Leroy Nieman, I guarantee you that every one of you either have a Leroy Nieman painting in your home, at the local club, at the bar. Leroy Nieman is everywhere. The most famous artist of our time. He's a great sports artist. And Leroy, your favorite sport is?
I am a fight freak.
That's what makes me happy about
that's why
Leroy
we're here.
Nieman.
I come from a fight town, St. Paul, Minnesota, Mike Gibbons' country. So I was raised in that element. I tried boxing when I was a kid, but everybody had to be clever up there. Slip punches.
Yeah, that's the way they used to fight up there. They had the brothers.
Paint and all that sort of thing.
They had the brothers up there.
The Gibbons brothers and myself. They had a lot of good fighters.
I think they went in
Flanagan
pairs.
brothers are up there.
The Flanagan brothers.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the ones I mean.
They were good fighters.
Del
Flanagan beat Sandy Sadler. He beat a lot of people.
You know, Leroy, you've been around now. You're in the middle of every big event. It's the Super Bowl, there's Leroy Nieman. World Championship fight, there's Leroy Nieman. I want to talk about the events later, Leroy, but you've been around fighters all your life. Who is your favorite fighter of all time?
It's unchallengeable. Joe Louis is the great.
Well, Joe Louis, in my opinion, he was my favorite fighter of all time. Leroy, I spent a lot of time with Joe. And, you know, a lot of people, they think that Joe Louis was just a dumb guy that everybody took advantage of. You know him and I know him. The guy had a great sense of humor. For example, when I first brought Emil Griffith out to Vegas to defend his title, Joe Louis was out there, and naturally Griffith had stars in his eyes. When he first met Joe Louis, so Joe said to Emil, he said, can you lend me $1,000 till my next fight? And Emil, being an innocent kid, sure, Joe, sure. When's your next fight? Joe says to him, when you try to get the 1,000 back. I mean, that's the kind of guy Joe Louis was.
Yeah,
let's take a look at one of your paintings of Joe.
Of Joe?
Sketches of Joe Louis. There's a photograph.
Sketching on the side with Joe in front of me. Sonny Liston's on the heavy bag. That's Willie Reddish hidden there.
Yeah, and that's the young Leroy Nieman.
Yeah, that's a very young Leroy Nieman.
And that was down in Florida.
That was the first the first Clay Liston fight.
And there you were watching Joe.
Teddy Brenner brought Joe Louis to my studio one time. And Joe was wearing a brown suit, light brown shirt, brown shoes. I said, Joe, I really like you in brown. His eyes, the brown bomber, aren't it?
There you go. That was his sense of humor. He always had an answer for everybody.
Yeah.
I wish the general public would have got to know Joe Louis better, to have a slightly different opinion of him. He always knew the right thing to say, or always kept you happy. Anyhow, you always having a good time when you're around Joe Louis.
Oh, yeah, he was marvelous.
Let's take a look at another one of your pictures, Leroy.
Well, this is the last night that Joe Louis lived. It was a fight, one of the Larry Holmes fights at Caesar's Palace. There with Harry Wald. That's Joe. I got on a plane, got back to New York, paper, Joe Louis died.
Yeah, and Harry Wald, he was the president of Caesar's Palace at the time. And those were great events and great days, Leroy. You've been involved, as we say, with so many great events, Super Bowls, World Series. What is the greatest sports event that you ever were at, Leroy, and participated in?
The greatest sports event happened to be a boxing event. That was Ali Frazier won, right here, right in town here. That was the greatest spectacle I've ever seen.
Well, that was, in my opinion, that was the greatest event that I've ever seen. I worked with Joe Frazier that night. Right. I worked in Ali's corner to try to keep control. They were only allowed to have 3 guys up the ring at a time. And each round, a different guy would try to get up there. One time it was Herbert Muhammad. The next time, you know, and they were so confused, you know, and yelling, "You got to hit him! You got to hit him, Ali!" You know. And meanwhile, Joe Frazier was really doing a job on him. And you remember, it was such a great fight. But you know, one thing a lot of people forget about that fight: Joe Frazier hit Ali with that down south punch in the last round and flattened him, knocked him down, which was really the turning point. Yes, Joe Frazier won the fight, because up until then it was like this. But when Ali got up,
Ali took the round.
When Ali got up, he came back, and I'm telling you, if the round was another minute longer, Ali may have had Joe out. I mean, that's the kind of heart that Muhammad Ali had anyhow. It was just such a great night with Sinatra taking a photograph, you doing the sketches. I mean,
what a
Bernadette
peacock there.
Bernadette Devlin, the Irish lady, was. I have to bring the Irish into this. You know that, Leroy.
You know, is there a great Irish fighter today? I doubt it.
You know, Leroy, I was never one of those guys. When I went to Paris, I didn't go to the Louvre, you know, and I'm not sophisticated about art at all. But you did a panoramic drawing of Madison Square Garden that first, it more or less separated the men from the boys. I realized what it was to have the gift and be an artist and be a genius. Ladies and gentlemen, this picture was a tremendous panoramic portrait of Madison Square Garden, and you could see the guys in the ring and everything. Then you saw a bunch of little circles around, like they're supposed to be heads. And that's what it looked like to me. It looked like just a bunch of little circles in the background, until I got a magnifying glass, and you could identify every single one of those circles. It was 125 identifiable people. That, to me, that was amazing. It looked to me like a little loop like that. And sure enough, I looked through the thing. I said, "Oh my goodness, there's Harry Markson." That's something, Leroy. You have to be.
Blobs of paint.
And 1, 2, 3, and you had a painting like that. It's unbelievable. Let's look at some more of Leroy's work now with the fighters and the trainers. These are the guys I like to look at.
This is the backbone of boxing. These are people that you don't see.
Let me see, Leroy. Who do we have there now?
We have Whitey Bimstein on one side.
Whitey Bimstein.
Charlie Goldman.
And
King David, an Israeli hope of theirs at the time.
It goes to show you that all great trainers, they don't always work with champions. These are two of the greatest trainers of all time, with a guy that just never made it.
This was Sunnyside Gardens, and the preliminary fighters used to have to carry the pail up the top of the stairs, and Whitey would take the pail and go to the ring.
Well, Whitey was quite a character, but a great trainer.
Man. Here's Freddie Brown.
Freddie Brown was a trainer, and the only thing that Freddie was a great trainer also. But what happened with Freddie Brown a lot, Leroy, he more or less became the manager of the fighter. The manager would call him up and say, "Freddie, I'm going to have your fighter fight Jimmy Jones." And Freddie would say, "No, you're not. He's not fighting." He forgot that he wasn't the manager. but he really was a great trainer. And he looked like a trainer with that flat nose and working with Ray Arcel all those years. He was perfect. That was a great team.
Perfect. He had a little stick in his mouth.
Who else do you have there now?
There's another guy with two swab sticks in his mouth. Chicky Ferrara.
Chicky Ferrara. That's the guy. Chicky Ferrara is the guy that taught my old sparring partner, Angelo Dundee, just about everything that he knew about training. I don't know if you knew that, but Angelo served his apprenticeship under Chicky Ferrara.
Well, he brought Chicky back for Ali's last fight then, too.
That's right, at the very end. But Chicky was one of those guys, always worked with good fighters.
Well, see, but never... he has two sticks in his mouth. Yeah. Angelo always had his back of the ear.
Yeah, well, you know, the Italian way with Angelo, you know. Oh, Chicky was
Here's another more than journeyman trainer.
Yeah, mediocre guy.
1977 in the garden. Move. Use your hands. Punch.
Well, I was probably
great shouter
at Emil Griffith in those days, because
keep them interested.
You notice a little difference in my hair now and then, though, Leroy? I mean, I'm one of the few guys that grew more hair.
I know it. I'm very familiar with that incident, and was a fine-looking specimen prior to that.
Let's see, who do we have here now, Leroy?
Eddie Futch and Ray Arcel.
Here's Eddie Futch, just hired to work with Alex Stewart against Evander Holyfield, and Ray Arcel, the great trainer of all time. Leroy, it must have been great for you to be around all these characters all this time and all these great events. That was your biggest and your best How do you compare this with, like, being with the beautiful people? I know you go to Monte Carlo and places like that. How do you compare the fight guys?
You only have two sports, horse racing and boxing, where you have the down and outer and this tail carrier or horse, lead horse, where they had the dignity and they're consulted and their opinion means a lot.
You know,
they're wonderful people.
You mentioned that word dignity. And you know the thing that gets me angry is a guy like this Tony Mandich or Mark Gastineau. They think that they can get in the ring and fight. They take away from the dignity of every 4-round fighter that ever spent all those years in the gym and did all that road work, because these guys can't even fight a 4-round professional fighter.
You see that kid that Bill Clayton's got now, Bill Caton's got. Morrison. He's fighting. He's learning how to fight. He's learning right in the ring fighting.
Well, that's what you have to do. You have to spend the time. Nobody in this world ever knows how to fight. You have to be taught. And for them to just say that they can go in and fight, it really takes away from the dignity of a great sport.
Well, that's the thing that boxing's got, because it's such a science and such an art and so beautiful. And it takes people that really care about them to bring them out. Cold them in rain and let them lose.
Here's a guy that worked with me in many a fight.
Yeah, we all loved him.
Most dignified looking guy you ever saw in your life.
Man.
Sid Martin. Snow white hair, beautiful black skin. He was quite a guy. He could speak 5 languages, Sid. I don't know if you knew that, including English.
Yeah, and he could speak in Malta to the ladies, too.
Well, you said that. Well, you know, he's remarried now, Leroy. You know, Leroy, you look at the fighters from a different perspective than I look at them. I mean, I'm looking mostly at their technical skills and everything, and you take the overall picture of their character, their skills. Who were your favorite 4 or 5 fighters of all time, Leroy, and why?
The fighters that I really relate to are the fighters who have had respect and the culture they lived in. I think that's what makes them great. And you have to be a champion to get that visible. And some people, when they're champions, really carry themselves like champions. Like Sugar Ray Robinson was an ambassador to the world. He fought all over the world. He was just a spectacular personality, and he was a great fighter. I mean, the fighting could stand by itself, but he was even more than that. And you take Joe Louis, what he did, how the black people related to him, and what he did for the whole development of the black people, the war and the relationship to Hitler and Schmeling and all that. Unbelievable man. Then you take Ali. Well, we know Ali. That's very current. Ali was in North Africa and everything. This man was known. He's the most visible man in the whole world. He carried that responsibility. Then Willie Pep. You take Willie Pep. Now, there's a man who is certainly not an ambassador. He's kind of a Hartford. I know he's a New York kind of character, but he's the greatest fighter probably that ever moved around in the ring. That's
right. He was the Will-o'-the-Wisp was aptly named. You couldn't hit him. I mean, the only guy that really dominated him, and he beat him too, was Sandy Sadler, because Sandy was a freak, 6 foot 2 inches tall, and he could punch, and he was strong. Usually, if you take a featherweight and they're over 6 feet, they're weak physically, but Sandy had everything, and he had that punching ability. But even then, with that handicap, Pep was able to beat him in the one fight. And you know, Leroy, you mentioned something about carrying yourself like a champion. We recently did a reprise on Ray Robinson on CBS. And those are the exact words that I used. I said, when Ray Robinson walked into a ring, you knew you were looking at a champion. He was perfectly groomed. His shoes were shined. He had a suit that looked like it was poured on him. He had the pocket handkerchief, the tie. That's the way you're supposed to carry yourself and be a champion of the world. I don't know why these young fighters, you might be able to answer this, why don't these young champions I'm talking about, why can't they look back and learn from these guys and carry themselves that way?
I think there was some kind of a touchstone in the old days. When you made it, you identified with the successful and the rich and the bigger people in your culture. But today, when you get a young guy like Mike Tyson and everything, why, he still relates to, I can't say rock and roll only, but they always go back and try to relate to the young culture, to try to hold that audience. It's very important to them. And they don't, what they could really do is like Jack Dempsey. Jack Dempsey was, I was lucky enough to know Jack Dempsey, but all his life, he was a guy who was on a bum and freight cars and a brawler, a really tough guy.
Let's take a look, Leroy. Yeah. I think that we have a picture of you with Jack Dempsey.
Yeah.
There's the young Leroy Nieman.
There I am.
Folks, you have to admit he looks better now.
Looks
And
better.
there's Jack Dempsey, one of the greatest champions.
I was always sitting next to these great guys. I was always so humble. You know, there's something about being next to Jack Dempsey.
Well,
Some kind of fighting cocks or something like that.
and well, apparently it worked for him. He had a long, interesting life, Leroy. I mean, I don't want you to go on that diet just to follow Dali. You know, you're okay on your own.
I'm talking about Dolly, yeah.
Yeah, I know who he's talking about. Right?
Well, Ali had it.
Dali.
We used to have good food at Ali's camp, too.
Yeah, well, he had
chef
that great
there.
chef.
Oh, it's great.
You know, Leroy, you and I know each other a long time because it just coincidentally, Griffith had just become champion of the world, and you had just come on the scene as an artist, and you spent a lot of time on camera. Matter of fact, there's a picture of
There you are,
one of your pictures of me putting the robe on Emil Griffith.
I think you're taking it off of him.
Taking it off. Well, whatever I'm doing, I look like
Yeah.
an old guy anyhow compared to Griffith with that great...
Your hair is straight pompadour then.
Yeah,
So,
the hair was a little different, Leroy.
yeah.
And then, you know about Griffith now.
Now, there he is. I think that's in Bone Crusher's corner or one of these, somebody's corner during the fight.
It was probably the
Howie
Bone
Albert next to him.
And
there.
Howie Albert was that had to be Laporte's
Yeah,
championship
Laporte,
fight.
that's right, Laporte's fight.
Anyhow, that's
But he had the same dedication, I'm sure, to training he had as a fighter, wasn't he?
he's a hard worker as a
Yeah.
trainer. You know, Leroy, they're not going to have to throw any benefits for you. We know that. I mean, the numbers are astronomical. I mean, you have these prints, you have your original paintings. I know they go for $250,000, $300,000 a pop, and you do a few of them a year when you feel like it. But in the meanwhile, Leroy, like all these beautiful posters that you have here, you do the posters for the fights. Are any
That
of
is
these?
not a financially compensating experience.
I know you do that
You know
because you're a
that. I
fight
do that
fan.
'cause I get close
I
to
know
the
a
ring.
lot, Leroy. I know a lot of things that you've done that have been very, very nice, and I don't like to pat you on the back too much, but I have to say that you have dedicated or contributed free a lot of your posters for different events, whether they were trying to raise money for a charity or whatever it is, and there's always been a Leroy Nieman that somebody could buy and give the money to charity, which is a great thing that you do every once in a while. But never mind the posters. One of these posters is a print, and I think it's this Ali Foreman one over here. The general public can go into just about any shopping center. Whoever your distributor is has got to be the greatest guy in the world, because I've been all over the country, and you walk into an art center, and there's always there's the Ali Foreman fight.
Well, there was a silk screen print made of this with the lettering is superimposed, it's taken off, it's the print. And that is the original George Foreman there.
Right, the guy just before I got him when he had the fight with Ali in Zaire.
And I like George. George happens to be one of my heroes.
Well, George is a very, very strange guy, George. How do you say you go to your own drummer, whatever it is anyway. He walks a different line than the general public.
He marches to his own drummer.
Marches to his own drummer. And he's still marching to his own drummer. And I still predict that he's going to get the fight with Tyson, and it's going to be one of the biggest money makers of all time.
And he could even be dangerous, too. Because he could fight.
Not anymore, Leroy.
No, you don't
I
think
don't
so?
think so. He's
No.
too slow. He doesn't have the hand speed to cope with a young Mike Tyson. I'd like to see him try somebody that can fight a little bit, a heavyweight, not a cruiserweight. And then if he could beat that guy, then maybe he might have a little credibility. But the general public, Leroy, I'm walking with you, they recognize you as a fight fan. I guarantee you there's a lot of people come up to you, especially at these cocktail parties that you always attend, and they say, Leroy, what do you think of Foreman's chances in the Tyson fight? It happens to me all the time.
Yeah. And I say that I think it's going to be a good fight. Be an exciting fight. Punches will bounce off of him.
He's
So he
such a
gets hit in the chin, and it's
such
the
a
end.
big guy. And, you know, he always has that thing that he was able to take care of Joe Frazier, and they mentioned the styles are similar.
Yeah.
Frazier's the shorter guy, and he was able to push Joe back with that tremendous strength and hit him with those bombs that he threw.
He's probably even stronger today.
I'd say so.
He's an awesome-looking figure.
Such a big guy to hit. You know, he can surround you in the ring while he's there. But anyhow, George Foreman, as you say, he's a strange guy. I mean, he does that religious work. And he swears that he doesn't want any of the money for himself. I mean, he wants it for the youth, to have his youth program in Houston. And that's what he's been doing. He says since he had the visitation from Christ after the Young fight, he says he doesn't need any material goods, and he seems to be very happy.
Well, he sure looks happy. He's also a credit to the fight game, actually. You know?
Well,
he only lost a couple of fights.
That's right. Now, what about you, Leroy? What's your next project? What are you working on right now?
Actually, I'm doing some auto racing things now. I'm kind of seasonal. You know, I'm in baseball season now. Then I stretch the baseball season, do a little basketball in there. Then I keep doing my other subjects, my gambling casinos and my bars and my other. I paint ladies. Remember that?
Yes, I know.
Then I have Super Bowl time. Then we go toward the Stanley Cup again, and intermingle through there are the big fights.
The U.S. Open.
Oh, got that. Wimbledon.
But in the meanwhile, Leroy, you always come back to your first love, and that's boxing.
If there isn't a big fight, you'll find me down at Felt Forum.
That's what I like about you. Well, that's the kind of guy that's a real fight fan, can read the fighters, and that's why these paintings come out so good. And Leroy, I want to thank you very much for being on my show. Yeah. I'm honored. Thanks very much, Leroy.
Boxing, man against man, the ultimate sport. Get ready to rumble. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Gil Clancy's Boxing Journal. With your host, legendary trainer and boxing expert, Gil Clancy. Featuring the biggest and brightest stars, plus the up-and-comers of the fight game. Gil Clancy's Boxing Journal.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another edition of Gil Clancy's Boxing Journal. My guest tonight is the guy that brought me out of retirement after 12 years. How could you do that to me, Gerry? What is it with you?
Hello, Gil. How you doing today?
I'm doing fine. And how are you doing?
Great. I feel terrific being up here at Caesars, Brookdale, and I'm excited about fighting George Foreman January 15th. Yeah.
Gerry, you can't talk so fast. The whole interview will be over like that.
Right.
Speak up nice and let the people know what's going on. Caesars, Brookdale.
And I'm really happy that I'm working with you, Gil. And I'm excited and looking forward to getting into the ring with Big George Foreman January 15th.
Well, you know, it's been 12 years since I've trained a fighter, but believe me, coming back into the gym the first day, I felt like I had never left. And being that I started with a fighter that was already in condition, the work isn't too hard at all. And as Gerry said, we have the ideal training camp here in Caesars Brookdale. You couldn't build a better training camp if you tried to build one. You know, Gerry, I'm sure the people would like to know what made you decide to come back to boxing. You're a successful businessman, very wealthy guy. I know I can always borrow a buck from you if I need it. Why did you come back to boxing?
Well, I guess, you know, everybody could always look back and say, you know, well, at least I could say, I wish that when I was 23, I know what I know now, but that's impossible. So I wasn't really happy with the way my career ended. There was a lot of one day the fight was on. It seemed like I was forever in training camp. I spent 10 years in training camp to have 3 fights. I couldn't get a fight. And, you know, it's like pulling a rubber band, stretching it out, pulling it back. You know, kind of wore me out. It kind of got really uncomfortable with myself and the people that I was around. And I stepped away. I looked at what was going on, and I started to get healthy and taking care of myself. And I decided that they were throwing George Foreman at me for quite a while. I started to train, and I didn't agree to the fight for a while. And then when I got myself into shape, I decided to. It was a great shot for me, and that's how you and I got together.
Well, you know, we met at the track that one day. You asked me to come out to look at your work. I was amazed at the condition that you were in already, and you hadn't started to spar or anything, and you convinced me that you're really serious about boxing now. And you know, I always thought you had all the potential to do anything you wanted to do in the ring. And right now, that's what we're working on, Gerry. We're working on getting you to do anything you want to do in the ring at any time you want to do it. How are you coming along with that, Gerry?
Well, you know, Gil, you're 100% right, and I have formed some not so great patterns in my career. Some things that we are working hard on changing. And it's kind of frustrating because when you form certain patterns, it's hard to break them. But with those kind words you're always talking to me, Gil, I'm sure that you know, we have 8 weeks up here left in training, and things seem to be going well. My conditioning is going fine. I had to burn off some more rust. It's been a long time since I've been in the ring, and I'm just real excited about it. I'm excited about getting into the ring that night and proving some things to myself.
Well, you know, Gerry, I compare you to Bone Crusher Smith in this one mental aspect. When he fought Mike Tyson, they called him Bone Clutcher, and rightly so, because he just was afraid to fight. For 11 rounds, he grabbed Tyson, and finally in the 12th round, he threw a couple of punches, and he found out that he could hurt Tyson, but it was too late. But it was such a bad performance that he just didn't want to let his career end. And then he came back, and he did lose a fight, but he was great in losing the fight. And he's come back, and he scored a couple of knockouts since. Your performance with Michael Spinks, as you've heard me say many a time, was not any way to end a career. That's not the Gerry Cooney that I knew as a fighter, and I don't think that any fight fan in the world knew. And I'm glad that you're back, because I'm sure you're going to prove to the public that that the new Gerry Cooney is really the old Gerry Cooney when he was an amateur, the kid that has all of the fire and all of the ability to go all the way in this business. And that's what I'm looking forward to, Gerry. I'm looking forward to the day you walk in that ring and you're comfortable and you can do anything you want in there.
Well, and I too, I'm happy to be able to get back in and to feel myself and to work through it and have a healthy training camp. You know, there was so much confusion I had, and it's something definitely exciting to look forward to.
You know, the guys, they're not kids. The guys you have as sparring partners, to me, are the greatest bunch of guys in the world. I mean, they really are. Like, I spoke to a couple of the kids. They say, you know, we're like one big family. Mark Young said, you know, he said, boxing is an individual sport, but if Gerry wins, we feel like we all won. Now, that's been the attitude of these guys up here. I've never seen sparring partners more cooperative in my life.
Well, these guys are really training hard to get themselves in great shape, and they're giving me great work, and they make it more and more difficult for me to land a punch. So it's difficult for a fighter to speak about, you know, being friendly with a guy who's throwing punches at you every day. But yeah, these are a great bunch of guys. They have good, promising careers, and I'm happy to get the chance to work with them.
You know, Gerry, we're up here in this training camp. It's a beautiful spot, Caesars Brookdale, but there is 24 hours in a day. People don't realize it only takes about an hour and a half in the gym, so you have plenty of time on your hands. Tell the public what a regular, normal day is for you here in the training camp. I'm sure they'd be interested.
Oh, I'm sorry, I can't answer.
Well,
we get up like around 6 o'clock in the morning, and we get dressed up. It's getting kind of chilly up here now. We get out on the road and do 3 to 4 to 5 miles a day. We come back. We have some great weight training equipment over here to your right that we train and do stomach work in the morning. When we finish up, we go and grab a good, strong, hearty breakfast, and we're up to get some rest, take a little walk, and rest up a couple hours, because we got these 3 big guys in the back here that chase me around the ring every day, and then I come here and we go through this workout here, and then we kind of rest. I take a jacuzzi, ice myself down, and get dressed to go and have dinner, and maybe catch a show here at the Caesars Brookdale, or go out and see a movie, or some really nice people up here. So we kind of try and change things around a lot, so things don't get too repetitious and boredom can set in. But it's a really nice place to be up here, and it's quite a busy day.
you know, what I try to stress to Gerry, I know it's tough. Like he said, he's got 3 tough guys there that really push him around the ring and make him work every day. And it seems kind of strange to say, but I try to stress that Gerry should have some fun when he's in the ring. He should relax once in a while, box. You know, the day that I'm going to know that you're really on the way to being what I know you can be is the day that you spin one of these sparring partners, and instead of hitting them a shot, just pat them on the rear end and say, here I am over here. You know what I mean? Where you hide on them. That's what I'm really trying to, interested in have you do, you know?
Well, Gil has definitely calmed me down, helped me to enjoy myself more. I kind of came from a camp that was very intense all the time, and everything was tight. You had to be tight all the time. And I'm realizing with age and experience that, and from Gil teaching me that we can be more relaxed, and the punches that you throw while you're relaxed can be just as effective, if not more effective. And it's quite a nice twist in things, so to say.
Gerry, you know, there's a lot of fighters out there. Big George Foreman, 19 straight knockouts. Why did you pick Big George for an opponent?
Well, I think that Big George picked me as an opponent, and I understand that the public out there is really interested to see if George Foreman deserves a shot with the Mike Tyson. And I understand he's knocked out 19 victories, 19 knockouts. And the word started getting around that they were offering me a fight with him, and I kind of turned it down. I was working some things out in my personal life and coming to grips with some of my past, and I started to feel good and healthy, and I started to work out, and they kept asking me that question, will you fight, and, you know, I started to move around, hit the bags a little bit, and, you know, quite obviously, as you said, you know, my performance with Michael Spinks was not really, you know, it's difficult to express how you can be in a training camp for 2.5 years, and one day you're fighting, the next day the fight's off, next day it's on, next day it's off. You know, I had somebody who was representing me at the time. I told him on two or three occasions to forget it, because it was too much of a strain. The fight was on, it was off. It was hard to maintain a high level of intensity during training, and well, with that there, I just kind of got lost.
Well, now you're back. You have the formidable guy, Big George. Not until January 15th, you know.
Okay, so
you'll be complaining to me that I'm keeping you in training camp
I'm still talking, Gil. I'm still talking, Gil.
I mean, work and work and work. But I'm going to give you a little rest here. I may even give you Thanksgiving Day off, and maybe even Christmas Day. Isn't that nice? Not New Year's, though.
You know, it's really amazing that, you know, we can focus in on take care of the things we need to take in and train hard and work hard and focus our energies in. And we can mix it up. We can get a few days off to go home and see our family during the holidays or Thanksgiving, and come back and still have a great mental attitude and still be hungry and aggressive and not become worn out and disgusted if the fight's going to take place or it's not going to take place. I'm confident this fight's going to take place January 15th. I'm very confident in Tom Mara and George Munch and Gil Clancy. And myself most of all, and I want to win this fight for me, and I know it's a lot of work, it's a lot of pain, a lot of muscle aches, and a lot of getting socked in the nose at times, but I'm happy to be able to do it today, and I'm glad that I have this opportunity.
You know, you mentioned George Munch. He's a kind of an atypical guy. Most of these guys, when they get into the main bout class or the superstar status, the way you are, they have this regular entourage of guys. You see 12 guys following down the aisle into the ring. There's one guy that puts on their left shoe. The other guy puts on the right shoe. George is the entire entourage. He does everything. What about that?
Well, George and I kind of grew up, we know each other since the second grade, and he's been very powerful in my career, and we do a lot of work together. George, you know, doesn't seem to get the credit he really deserves for all the work he puts in, and he's just one of those special guys that works and is really focused on me being successful, and he's kind of a special guy to have around.
Okay, Gerry, you didn't have to go far to stop on my show, so I'm not going to thank you too much, but
thanks, Gil.
I'll see you in the ring here in about 20 minutes.
Right.
My next guest is Tom Mara. I don't know how to describe you, Tom. Gerry Cooney's friend and business partner, business manager. How would you be introduced?
At first, I consider myself to be Gerry's friend. That's first and foremost and most important to me. We have a very good relationship as just two human beings. Secondly, we have a business relationship. We're involved in several different business interests together. And thirdly, I've taken on at least some of the functions that a normal manager would take on because he doesn't have a manager and someone has to do it. The prime thing I did was to negotiate a contract for his trainer and for the fight itself, right? So that was, everything else I do is secondary. In fact, I think most of the time I do what you tell me to do next as a manager.
I don't know about that. But you know, I don't want to embarrass you or anything, Tom, but Gerry Cooney has made a complete 100% turnaround. And I have to credit Tom Mara for this big change here. I guess, I just don't know, Tom, what kind of an influence? How did you manage to get to Gerry and help him straighten out his life?
You're not the only one who said something like that, and I thank everybody for their kind remarks, but I think actually Gerry was well into the process of changing himself around, actually, when I first met him. And the relationship we developed was one where I was one of the few people who would tell him exactly what was on my mind, and sometimes I came close to finding out what a tremendous left hook really looks like, I think. But Gerry listened to what I had to say, and most times it was very critical of what he was doing or not doing, as the case would be. And after a while, he just sort of got to the point where he would hear what I had to say and go do whatever he decided to do anyways, not necessarily what I thought should be done. But we just have an open ability to discuss. I'd say it's almost more like a father and son, although I don't like to think of Gerry as being my father.
Right. You're right, Tom. You know, the first time I met Tom Arrow was at Angel Cordero, the famous jockey's wedding this summer. And he indicated to me at the time that Gerry might be interested in coming back to boxing. And, you know, a lot of guys, they do get that itch once in a while. But I filed it away. I never thought anything would come of it. And you see, a lot of people, they say it's not good to go to the racetrack. If you go to the racetrack enough, you're bound to get burned. But it was at the racetrack where I met Tom Arrow and Gerry. And Gerry had been in light training and asked me if I would come out to take a look at him to see how he looked. And I went out to the gymnasium in Huntington, and I was amazed at the physical condition of Gerry Cooney, and that was quite some time ago, Tom.
That goes back to, I guess, August, sometime in August, something like that, early August?
Early September or the middle of August.
Somewhere in there. Well, Gerry, from time to time, you know, had mentioned to me that someday he might like to fight again, and I said, well, you know, you can always fight. You don't have to fight today, tomorrow. You can fight 2 years from now. You know, you're 33. People are fighting, you know. We have a fighter, for example, Gerry and I are involved with Roberto Duran, and he's not doing too bad for himself at 37. So I said, you know, not necessarily you want to come back at 37, but you can always do that. And it would pop up every 3 months. And every once in a while, it would pop up with another offer for him to fight George Foreman. So he had been having, I guess you'd call it feelers, to fight George for some period of time. Once in a while, another name would be mentioned, but most frequently, George. The time I remember most was a year ago this Christmas. On the beach at Marco Island, my home in Marco Island. Gerry brought it up, and we had probably an hour, 2-hour conversation about the pros and cons and what he should consider, what he shouldn't, and it just went back on the back burner. And then I think we talked to Bob Arum on another matter in April or May, and at that time Bob said that maybe this was something that should be thought about a little bit more seriously. And again, it got tucked away, and it wasn't until June or July that Gerry brought it up and gave me what I considered to be the best reason of all for fighting. It's because he wanted to fight. You know, Gerry doesn't need the money, doesn't need the attention. He gets plenty of attention, as you know, when he just walks into a room. He just decided he just plain wanted to fight, and I just for the first time got the vibes that he really meant this, and I said, I'll call you tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock. If you still feel that way, I'll call Bob Arum. I called him at 9 o'clock. He said, I want to fight. He told me who he wanted to fight, when he wanted to fight, where he wanted to fight. Seemed like someone knew what he was talking about. So I called Bob, and Bob called me back in 2 hours and said the fight was made.
Wow, just that quick, huh?
Happened fast.
Well, you know, since the fight was announced, it's received a tremendous public interest. Apparently, a lot of the people, I know I'm in the boxing business, there's more people come up to me and say there's only one guy that can beat Mike Tyson, and that's Big George Foreman. And so Foreman has really come to the forefront with his 19 straight knockouts. But then when Gerry was advertised as his opponent, it really took off like a rocket.
I mean, I think that I don't know who can beat Mike Tyson. I know that Gerry will beat Big George Foreman.
Joe Clancy's Boxing Journal. Ultimate sport. Get ready to rumble.